The day I put myself first and turned my pain into strength. I'm Nikolai. I'm 32 years old, and I never thought a single day could change so much in my life. For years, I carried the feeling of not being enough, of always being behind, of never being valued in my own family. I grew up watching my brother Pedro praised for everything he did, while my efforts were ignored or ridiculed. So, when I received the invitation to his wedding, I felt a mixture of hope and fear. I wanted to believe it was a chance for reconciliation, to show that despite everything, I had built my life with dignity, even if far from what they called success. But that day, I never imagined I would face the worst, and, at the same time, find my truest strength. I arrived at the wedding venue with a tightness in my chest. Every detail seemed to scream at me. The impeccable dress, the perfect decorations, the practiced smiles. I tried to calm myself, took a deep breath, and forced a smile, trying to convince myself I was there to support my brother and maintain a semblance of normalcy. But the tension grew with every step I took toward the entrance. I felt my parents watching me, judging every movement, every gesture, as if my very presence was already a mistake. Anxiety began to mix with an old fear, that of being humiliated, of listening to that inner voice that always told me I wasn't good enough. When we finally met, what I expected to be a timid hug and a word of reconciliation turned into public ridicule. My parents and brother began commenting on my aimless life, my career, which they said didn't compare to Pedro's brilliant trajectory. Humiliation began to burn in my chest, and I felt a lump in my throat, a mixture of shame, anger, and disbelief. Each word was a knife, each laugh a confirmation that, to them, I would never be valuable. For a few seconds, I stood paralyzed, thinking about running away, but something inside me ignited. It was at that moment that I realized the pain I felt could be transformed into something greater: clarity and courage. I took a deep breath, feeling the heat of anger mixed with determination. I couldn't allow them to continue to diminish me, to manipulate everyone's perception of me and my worth. I began to remember all the times I'd struggled alone, the silent victories I'd built over the years, the challenges I'd faced without support, without recognition. That moment, which had seemed like nothing more than a humiliation, was about to become the turning point in my life. So, I spoke. And it wasn't a memorized or rehearsed speech, but the raw truth I felt, the injustice, the favoritism, the toxic behavior that had been eroding my self-esteem for years. Each word came with a power I didn't know I possessed, each sentence carrying years of pain and frustration. At first, shock filled the room. Surprised looks and murmurs began to spread. But I continued, letting my emotions flow, exposing what was real, without fear of seeming exaggerated or overly sensitive. For the first time, I felt free to be myself in front of those who had always belittled me. As my words began to echo around the room, I felt a mixture of relief and fear. Relief at finally expressing myself, fear of what would come next. The murmur of people grew louder, and I could see a mix of surprise and anger in my parents' eyes. My brother Pedro, who always seemed untouchable, began to blush, trying to maintain the smile that hid his insecurity. It was then that I realized that his image of success, which they so extolled, might not be as solid as everyone believed. And this gave me even more strength to carry on. Every word that came out of my mouth was filled with years of silence and suffering. I was tired of keeping quiet, of pretending everything was fine. As I spoke, I began to observe Sofia, Pedro's wife. She had that expression of someone who's realized something they'd never noticed before. Gradually, the murmurs in the room began to fade into whispers of doubt and shock. And it was at that moment that a strange sense of justice began to wash over me. I realized that, as painful as it was to expose my family, it was necessary. It was time to show that I existed, that my efforts were real and valid, that I didn't need their approval to be valuable. And somehow I felt the power of that truth was changing everything around me. Then someone began to question what Pedro really did. I saw the opportunity and carefully began to reveal the truth about his career. He wasn't the successful businessman everyone imagined, but rather someone who depended on his wife, Sofia, for work. Expressions changed, looks that had once been filled with admiration, now filled with disbelief and embarrassment. It was a strange, almost surreal feeling to see the lie that had sustained my family's pride crumble before everyone's eyes. And despite all the tension, I felt a strange sense of justice. Finally, the truth was being revealed. Meanwhile, Sophia began to understand the situation, and her demeanor changed completely. She looked at me, and in that instant, I felt a silent recognition. I didn't need applause or praise. It was just validation that I had done the right thing, even if it was painful. That silent confirmation from Sophia brought unexpected comfort. The feeling that I wasn't alone, that my voice was finally having an impact, began to fill me with hope. For the first time, I felt the weight of years of humiliation begin to lift, that I could breathe without the guilt and shame of always being belittled. Marriage, which had previously seemed like a stage for humiliation, became an opportunity for transformation. The initial anger, shame, and despair began to transform into clarity. I realized that overcoming pain doesn't come from ignoring it, but from facing it, exposing the truth, and embracing one's own worth. That moment showed me that strength doesn't come from pleasing others, but from recognizing oneself. Even though the pain was still present, I felt something inside me change forever. Fear and insecurity began to give way to courage and self-confidence. My family's reaction was immediate and intense. My parents turned white, as if every word I said had been a direct blow to their pride. Pedro no longer knew where to turn. The discomfort and shame were clearly visible on his face. Family and close friends began to whisper, and tension spread through the room like a silent fire. I felt my heart race, a mixture of fear and adrenaline coursing through my body. But at the same time, there was a strange sense of freedom. Finally, I was confronting everything that had hurt me for so many years, and I could feel my voice carrying weight. Meanwhile, Sophia began to pull away from her husband, watching every movement, every gesture, every word. The disbelief and anger were evident in her eyes, and I could sense that she was finally beginning to see the truth that Pedro had previously hidden. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just defending myself, but helping someone open their eyes to the manipulation and lies that sustained the entire family's pride. It was a powerful and, at the same time, comforting feeling. I didn't know what would come next, but I felt I had fulfilled my role to show that the truth matters, even if it hurts. With each passing moment, the tension grew. My parents tried to interrupt, but I didn't back down. My legs felt firm, my chest heavy, but my mind clear. I was determined not to let them control me any longer with their words and judgments. For years, I'd carried shame and insecurity, but in that moment, I felt something new. Strength. The strength to face humiliation head-on. The strength to look into the eyes of those who belittled me and still recognize myself. It was painful, but liberating. Finally, I allowed myself to be heard without fear. Then Sophia spoke, and the entire room fell silent. She looked at Pedro and spoke firmly, decisively, something I never expected. She began to question their relationship, showing that she would no longer tolerate manipulation and lies. I felt every word as confirmation of everything I'd said, and a sense of righteousness began to spread through me. For the first time, I felt that my courage not only freed me, but also positively impacted someone else. Sophia saw Pedro and decided she would not accept continuing a relationship based on deceit. And in that moment, I realized that my strength had been the catalyst. When she announced she was annulling the marriage, a mix of emotions washed over me. Joy, relief, disbelief, and even a bit of pain. For everything I'd been through, for all the times I'd felt less than I truly am. But above all, I felt empowerment. For the first time in my life, I had the final say. For the first time, I felt my voice could transform the reality around me. And as I watched Sophia walk away from Pedro, I could finally breathe, feeling that the humiliation, anger, and pain had given way to something much greater: recognition, freedom, and hope. After the initial shock, I stood there, feeling every sensation course through my body. The room, previously filled with judgmental stares, felt strange, almost silent, and I realized that something inside me had changed forever. The shame that had haunted me for years began to dissolve, giving way to a feeling I had never fully experienced: pride in myself. For the first time, I didn't need to prove anything to anyone but myself. The pain was still there, but it was no longer a weight that immobilized me. It was a reminder that strengthened my courage and my determination to move forward. As I looked at the bewildered faces of my family, I felt a newfound clarity. I understood that for too long, I'd let them define my worth and self-esteem, and that this needed to change. Every judgmental look I'd received throughout my life no longer held power over me. For the first time, I felt able to say, "I am enough," without needing external validation. And despite all the discomfort and tension that still lingered in the air, I felt a genuine freedom. The freedom to be myself, to respect myself, to set boundaries, and to recognize my own strength. After that day, the feeling of empowerment began to spread to other areas of my life. I began to see my efforts differently, appreciating every small achievement that I had previously ignored or downplayed. I realized that overcoming challenges isn't just about facing others, but also dealing with one's own fears, insecurities, and old wounds. I still carried scars, but for the first time, they didn't stop me from moving forward. Instead, they were reminders of my ability to endure and hold firm, even when all seemed lost. I also realized that life goes on, even after such intense moments. My relationship with my family didn't mend overnight, and there was still hurt, but something had changed. My perspective. I understood that my worth doesn't depend on approval, wealth, or apparent success. I just needed to be true to myself, and that was enough to feel pride and satisfaction. The relief and sense of justice gave me the courage to make more informed decisions, seek healthier relationships, and invest in myself authentically. Today, when I think about that day, I feel a mix of emotions: pain, still present in some memories, but also gratitude and strength. Gratitude for having the courage to put myself first, to face the humiliation and find my voice. Strength for realizing that overcoming doesn't depend on time, but on attitude, courage, and determination. I'm still working through the pain, but I feel like I'm finally on the right path, and the sense of freedom and clarity I felt that day remains with me. A constant reminder that I can face any challenge without diminishing myself. In the days that followed, I felt a lasting effect from that moment. The shame I'd carried for years began to dissipate, and a sense of self-worth took its place. I began to realize that, although my experiences with my family had been painful, they had also taught me something essential: inner strength. I could survive humiliation, lies, and manipulation, and emerge on the other side more self-aware and determined. For the first time, I felt that my life didn't need to be compared to anyone else's, nor measured by others' standards. With each reflection on that day, I realized how the courage to face the situation transformed my perspective. I learned that telling the truth, even when it hurts, is a form of liberation. It's not easy, it's not simple, and it's certainly not something done without fear. But the feeling of authenticity, of finally expressing oneself without restrictions, was incomparable. I began to invest more in myself, prioritize my well-being, and cultivate relationships that truly value me. It was as if, suddenly, I had permission to exist fully, without the shadow of my family's constant criticism. There are still moments of remembrance of the pain and humiliation, but now they don't paralyze me. They serve as reminders of my resilience and my ability to overcome adversity. I feel like I've matured, that I've found my voice and my strength, and that this is something no one can take away from me. Every time I think about that day, I remember that I was able to confront the lies, expose the truth, and, even amidst the tension, remain true to myself. It's a feeling I carry with me as a shield and a source of confidence. Looking back today, I see that that day was the beginning of a new phase in my life. I no longer need their recognition to feel complete. I learned to value my achievements, my dedication, and my authenticity. What seemed like a painful moment became a turning point, an opportunity to free myself from other people's expectations and criticism, and finally feel at peace with myself. And even though my relationship with my family will never be perfect, I know I've found my strength and my truth. Sharing my experience here is a way to reaffirm that it is possible to overcome painful situations, even when they seem overwhelming. I still carry some of the pain, but I also carry the pride of having resisted, of having spoken my truth, and of having found emotional freedom. If there's one thing I want whoever reads this to understand, it's that overcoming begins when we recognize our worth and dare to defend our dignity, even in the face of judgment and humiliation. Today I know it is possible to bounce back, and the first step is to put yourself first.